My name's Amanda, and I'm 31 years old. And I'm just here pretty much to tell you my story of, my life before addiction, after addiction, and during addiction. I grew up here in Cincinnati, and it was a pretty normal childhood. I grew up in like a suburban family. My mom had me very, very young, so my grandparents helped take care of me a lot of the times. I went to a really good school. I did get bullied a lot as a kid because I was tall and a little heavier than the quote-unquote normal sized child. And my dad was an addict. He was not in my life at all. So I always had a lot of questions about that. And when I went to middle school, I didn't really have a lot of friends. But I played a lot of sports, so that kind of kept me focused and centered. I played basketball all the time. I played that up into high school, and then I wanted to start hanging out with the cool kids, so I quit playing basketball and started not making the best of decisions, and started hanging out with a group of kids that I didn't even go to school with, that they did whatever they wanted. So I just started experimenting with like the gateway drug that they like, weed and so forth. And by my senior year, I was already addicted to cocaine, and was in my first rehab, outpatient rehab, by the time I was 19 for cocaine. I was working and serving. I've always been a server. It's kind of like cash on hand, so when you do drugs, it's kind of perfect. The first outpatient rehab did not go well. I didn't even finish it. Of course, I made friends in there that they were doing the same thing I was doing, thinking about, how can we scheme and do this and still be in rehab and still get high at the same time. I didn't go to college right after high school. And when I was a server, I kind of slowed down on the cocaine and was introduced to my first opiate at the age of 20. And I had a coworker say, like, you'll work really fast, you'll make really good money, it will make you really happy. And so I was like, all right. So I tried it for the first time and then fell in love completely. It became an everyday thing, but I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know what, like, your body could become dependent on opiates. I didn't realize, the whole full extent of it. And so I did that for a good year, and then before I knew it, it got even worse, and I started doing Oxycontins, and all my money went to pills. I couldn't pay my bills. I started getting into legal trouble, started making really bad decisions. Thought it would be a good idea if I quit working in the restaurant business, that would help me. And I started working in like a bank atmosphere, and that's when I was probably at the peak of my pill use. It was awful. I was literally standing in at work, falling asleep. I wouldn't say falling asleep. I was nodding out, standing up in this bank atmosphere. And I lived in my own apartment, and I couldn't pay my bills, so I started stealing. Pretty much I was embezzling money from my job. And I did it for 6 months, and I got really scared, and I quit. And then about a year later, I had a detective knocking on my door at my parents' house. I had to go and talk to him, and I didn't know what to do, what not to say, what to say. And pretty much had to turn myself in. And that was my first felony. I got a felony 5 theft. And I was definitely now the black sheep of my family. Nobody in my family had been to jail. Nobody did drugs. They would drink and smoke cigarettes, stuff like that, on my mom's side of the family. And then I had to go to River City because I couldn't stay clean. I couldn't pass my drug test on probation. So I went and did River City. When I left there, a month out of River City, I had relapsed. By this time, there was a very shortage a very big shortage on pills. So my friend introduced me to heroin, and this was at 23. By this time, I tried it, and I hadn't used the needle yet, and I did that for a year. And within my first year of using heroin, I caught 2 more felonies, and this was against my own family. This was like a whole new, different type of addiction that I thought I knew what was going on, but I didn't. I got kicked out of my mom's house because, you couldn't trust me because you couldn't leave your purse out, or, I would, take things to pawn it for money because I never wanted to be sick. This is when I saw a whole different side of me that I didn't really know existed or could happen. You always would look and be like, I'm never going to do that, or I'm never going to be that. And then that's exactly what you turn into when you are doing heroin and doing it every day. This is where, it really just gets crazy. I went into the cat house, tried to get clean. I left. Then I had to live in my car for a while because nobody in my family could trust me in their house unless they were there with me. And then I started using it. I started shooting dope, and then that is when, I just started really scheming bad. I used to go in stores and take stuff, and I was not making good choices at all. There's no fear. When you get to a certain point, in my case, so I got to a certain point in my addiction where there was no fear. There was no fear of getting caught, and if I did get caught, I didn't care. I didn't care. I looked a mess. You could probably look at me and tell I was up to something no good. And then I went into the cat house again. And I'm on probation this whole time. I just completely quit calling the urine hotline to see if I have to, drop for probation. And before I know it, everything just hits me at one time. And it's like I have a choice. I'm either going to prison or I'm going to find a treatment center to try to get my life together. At this point, my mom calls my dad through the grapevine. We find out he's clean. And we're like, okay, well, where did he go? What did he do? And so my mom called him, and I found out that he went through City Gospel Missions. So I went into this program because I didn't want to go to prison, because I always heard about, you'll come out even worse. Then you have to worry about a prison number. So I went in front of my judge and pretty much pleaded and begged her to please to not send me to prison. I was at 25 at this time. So I went into a treatment facility for 2 years. And it was, I got to go to school, I got to really work on myself, but I didn't really get to the root of my problems. I was working on all the things in my addiction. But now I've learned that you don't really, for my case, you don't jump and do the things you did unless there's this underlying issue. And I guess I just never wanted to talk about it or deal with it. So I graduated the program. I got off of probation. And I stayed clean for about a year. I got an apartment, a car. Things were going, pretty well. And I kind of forgot where I came from and all this. Don't forget, in 1 second, you could make a bad choice and everything's going to be gone again. So I was, had a boyfriend trying to live your quote unquote normal life, and he was in recovery himself, and he was a really good guy, and I was really happy. And he proposed to me down on Fountain Square. And when they say love is blind and you don't really know what they're doing or what they are doing, a week later, after I was proposed to, I get a phone call from his pastor that he had overdosed and died. And I had no idea at all that he was using. He stayed with me every weekend. I didn't see any of the warning signs. I didn't see any of it. And that was so horrific. That was 4 years ago from now. He was very institutionalized. I look back on it now, and he just was having a hard time, and that was the only way he knew how to escape, and that was to get high. So that's what he did. And he had been clean for so long that he went and used what he normally used, and it killed him. So my family stayed with me through that whole process. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. Standing up, meeting his family for the first time. I'm thinking I'm going to meet these people at my wedding, and I'm meeting them at his funeral. It's all I was very numb. It was a big blur. I really didn't know how to cope with that, and I was still going to college, and I started doing pain pills again. And before I knew it, everything just started raveling out of control. I couldn't pay my bills. My electric got turned off. I was begging my mom to help me. I think she knew, but I think she was in denial a little bit. Or maybe just didn't want to see her daughter going down that path again. So I lose my apartment. I went and I lived with my grandfather, who was always my father figure as a child. And he was going through a really hard time because my grandparents got a divorce, and it was really hard on him. So he was very depressed man. And then you have me that comes in there to live with him, and I was very depressed. I was using drugs, but he didn't want to be alone, so he let me live there, and I think turned a blind eye to exactly what I was doing. And it was probably the worst decision, but best decision, because I was around him and he wasn't alone, but we enabled each other. He would let me, do what I wanted, use his car. He would take me to work. He would sleep all day. I should have been the granddaughter that was like, you should go on walks, you should do this, but I wasn't in the right state of mind. So you have a depressed, ill person, and then a depressed addict, myself, living together in one house. And looking back at it now, it was very, very unhealthy. At that time, I had wrecked my car, or technically it was his car, and I got an OVI because I had nodded out and hit a car. And I didn't want to face any of those consequences, so I just kept running and running and running from it and never dealt with it at all. I was working through this whole time. I've somehow kept a job. I've always probably wasn't the best at it and probably called off a lot, but I always was in a restaurant business. I always was serving because I knew if I worked, I could leave with cash. And that would hopefully cut down me from trying to do like illegal things. But I went to a lot of check and go places because I would have a bank account and, use my paycheck stubs. And I would hit every single like cash advanced check and go places in my area. And then they come after you. So it's like, double-edged sword any way you went. So I'm working and I'm, decide I need to go to treatment again because I need to do that. And I go to the cat house for my third time, and I don't even make it through detox. A girl comes in that I used to get high with, and me and her thought it would be this great idea to leave, and we left. And through my entire addiction, I stole from my family. I lied to my family. I lied to myself. most of all, I would believe, after so much time, I would believe my own lies. I was pretty much kind of brainwashing myself because I really didn't want to face what I was doing and all like the wreckage I was doing, all the hurt I was doing to myself and everybody around me. So I leave Kat for the third time and I go to my grandpa's pretty much to drop off my clothes. I gave him a really big hug and I stole his credit card. And, I went to Lowe's, went and got a gift card, and I would sell gift cards and get money for them. And, I was doing that and was gone for like 2 days straight. Didn't talk to anybody. The only person that knew I left treatment was my grandpa. And then I was like, okay, I need to go back home. I need to go back in here, and I can't believe I left treatment again. I can't believe I let myself down again. Because the person you let down the most besides everybody else is yourself. I always would have to look at everything I did and how am I going to fix all this, or how am I going to have people forgive me. So I went back to my grandpa's house and I'm sitting there and I'm like, maybe he went on a walk. It's really quiet. The dog's in there, and I'm sitting there for a good 30 minutes. And I guess that my grandmother had been calling his phone, my phone, and I wasn't answering, and he wasn't answering. So she comes over, and I'm all messed up. And she's like, "Where's your grandpa?" And I was like, I don't know. Like, I think he's on a walk, or I think maybe he went up to the bakery or something. Well, I start like looking around in the house, and the house is not that big. And I walk into his bedroom and I find him. He was passed away. That was an image that no one should ever have to like see, because I looked up to him my entire life as like my father figure and like the strong man who took care of his family, and he just was in this really like awkward position. And I remember having to call the police, and when everybody got there, I wanted to move him and they wouldn't let me move him because they had to like rule out suicide and if it was from natural causes and all this stuff. And it was awful. Within 20 minutes, I have my entire family at my grandfather's house, and I'm just standing there, and all these paramedics and cops and everybody are there, and it was, looking back on it now, I know he's in a better place because he was extremely unhappy, and he wasn't taking care of himself. He was telling me that he was taking like his heart medicine, and to find out, we opened up cabinets and stuff, and there was nothing but all of his medicine, like full prescription bottles of medicine. We had to plan the whole funeral. And this entire time I'm using. I went full blown back into using heroin because I didn't know how to deal with that. I didn't know what I was doing. I had my family asking me questions, lawyers. It was awful. It was horrific. Asking me medical questions. I didn't know because I wasn't there. I was physically there, but I was not there. But we made sure it was like beautiful and perfect for him. And so then after that, I was like, I got to go away. Maybe if I change like the area, like maybe if I leave Cincinnati and go to a rehab somewhere else, I'll maybe have a chance, or, so we find this rehab in Toledo. And then because I called my mom, and I suffer very much with the mental illness of this and the addiction side of this. And I called my mom and I was like, I'm either not going to be here anymore because I'm just going to end my life because I'm so miserable, or the addiction's going to kill me. I was like, I know I'm at this point where my body can't take anymore, and I mentally cannot take any more of this. So within 2 days, my mom's driving me to Toledo. And because of my insurance, I could only detox there. But they had like this outpatient thing where you would like go stay in a hotel and they would transport you back and forth to like all day programming. So you have 5 of us who are 5 days to 10 days clean in a hotel going back and forth to this day treatment thing. And I knew in my head that it was only a matter of time. I knew it. And it was. We all start using and ripping and running around in Toledo. I don't know anybody in Toledo. I just met these people. And I'm living in a hotel. And I started doing things in Toledo that I started boosting. And I never really boosted like that before in my life. I got kicked out of the hotel, of course, because I wasn't clean. And I was living in a truck with a pretty much a stranger. Anything could have happened to me up there. And I did that for like 6 weeks. And I called my mom and I was like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go. I was like, I'm gonna die up here or I need to come home. And I came home and I remember getting off the Greyhound and I was just very dirty because I couldn't shower up there. I remember my mom just crying and looking at me and I was real skinny and dirt. I smelled. It was living in a truck. And while I was in Toledo, I had called a rehab here in Cincinnati that I knew was long term. I knew I needed to go somewhere for a while. So I'm home for 1 day. And my mom drops me off at another rehab in Clermont County. I detox there, and they put you in a room, and they just let you go through it. And I remember laying there like, I don't ever want to feel like this again. It's like 30-something women, and you're laying there just detoxing, feeling like you're gonna die. And when I first got there, I didn't know if I was gonna stay. It was very strict. It was very intimidating. But it was definitely probably one of the best decisions I made, and I stayed. And I just was at my bottom. I didn't care. I let everything out. I let all the dirt that I did to people. I didn't care what you thought about me. I had to, work really, really hard and get to like my core issue, which I found out was self-doubt, abandonment, and what else was it? The things with like my biological father. That's why I kept using. I was trying to like submerge and mask all that because I didn't want to feel it. Because some of those feelings, you just feel like your heart's being like ripped out of your chest. And my mom came up there on Saturdays and visits, and before I know it, we're actually starting to have this relationship that I've always wanted to have with my mom. And I told my mom, you can ask me whatever you want. You may not like the answer, but you have the right to know. And I stayed there for 131 days. And when I graduated and left that program, I got into getting the Vivitrol shot because I knew it would be a very good idea for me to, I did a pros and cons list, like weighed out my options, talked to my family, and it was just a good way for me to go. Because by this point, I had been using opiates for 10 years and using drugs for 14. So I started that in treatment. And I continued to do that, and I graduated, and it was beautiful. I had a whole front row of my family there, and I never had felt like an adult. Like, I had a body of an adult, but I still had like the mindset of like a 15-year-old girl. And when I left that treatment center, I felt like a lot lighter. I knew I had gotten everything out. I wasn't hiding anything anymore. And I wasn't walking around with like 10,000 pounds of like rocks on my shoulders of guilt and just being ashamed of myself. So I went home. My mom let me come home for a month, and I went to groups because I knew when I left that treatment center, I couldn't just stop programming. I couldn't have all that free time on my hands. It just wouldn't have been a good idea, So I went and did, day programming for a few hours every day, like for a couple days a week. I did not start looking for a job right away. Me and my counselor decided that would not be a good idea. So I waited 3 weeks. I got a part-time job, and I got very involved with people who were on medicated assisted treatment as well, because I knew that I could talk to them and they would, understand, because we were all kind of in the same boat. So I went to counseling, and I got myself an apartment, by myself, and started meeting with a group of people every Wednesday for, people who are just like me. It was our little meeting of, people on medicated assisted treatment, where we could talk about if we had problems like with doctors, nurses, and people looking at us differently because we're going a different route and not fully diving into AA or NA. And at this time, I have my family trusting me again. I was 2 months out of treatment, which meant I was 6 months clean, and my mom asked me to house sit because they were going out of town. And I was like, is this really happening? Like, is my mom trusting me in her house alone? And since October to now, which is March, I will have house sat and watched my brother 2 times, and within a week or 2 I'm doing it again because they're going on spring break. I think I just knew that it was time to, put my big girl pants on, and that life's going to happen. You can deal with life if you have a good support system, if you're doing what you need to do, if you're, not running and masking it. Like, everybody's got problems. I just didn't have the right coping tools for that. And I have better ones now than I've ever had. I work in a really good restaurant environment that's not like your typical restaurant, I would say. And I will be having 10 months clean in a week. I'll be house sitting again in a week. I'm part of this great organization that's trying to do something new and help make people feel comfortable and be able to speak about, what saved their life, whether it be, Suboxones, Vivitrol, nothing, whatever it is. And I'm with them 3 days a week. I don't know. I know I'm doing things different this time. I know I'm not overloading my plate because I like to be like, I can do everything and I can fix you. And no, I can't fix you. I have to help you, but I can only fix myself. It's just been a different journey this time. It's been more of a fulfilling journey this time because I'm more honest with myself. I used to believe my own lies, and I would tell myself something so many times that I would believe that. And this time I'm like, okay, I can't do that. And you're not letting anybody down. You can't do it. and it's okay. You know, I'm not Superwoman, which when you're using, you think and feel like you are, but when you're not, it's just, you can't, and it's all right. It's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. I've learned to use the word no. That used to taste very weird coming out of my mouth, but now it is exhilarating. I'm like, no, I can't help you, you know. I do what I can when I can. But I will say I feel the most successful and happiest and more connected with my family now at 31 than I've ever been in my entire life. I know they trust me more than they have in a long time. It's been a lot of work and a long road, but now they know, they've learned and I've learned what our boundaries are and what I can and can't do and what they can and what they can't do. But yeah, I mean, it's been a good journey. It's been a rough journey. I've learned a lot of lessons. But you know, everybody has a story, regardless if it's addiction or not addiction, self-confidence, shopping. You know, everybody has their thing. So, but that's me.